Hello. By popular request, we are looking at Porphyria's Lover by Robert Browning, a poem with a psychopathic speaker, which is quite obviously not the poet. And it's a poem about a form of love, but that love really becomes more about power and control than it is about your kind of typical romantic love. So it's quite strikingly different from some of the tones of the other poems.
Okay, great. So the title, Porphyria's Lover. Porphyria is the woman in the relationship, and oddly, for this time period, it seems like she is the person that's in control from the title, because it's Porphyria's lover, so the lover is kind of hers, or she possesses him. And obviously, as Miss Davison said, power is a theme that runs throughout, and we'll see, as we discuss, whether Porphyria is actually the one who's in control or not.
Well, she seems to be at the beginning, but by the end, it very much seems like she is not. Just point out, Robert Browning was a Victorian poet, so when we talk about the time period, we mean the 19th century.
Patriarchal society and so
Exactly. Right, so the rain set early into night, the sullen wind was soon awake. It tore the elm tops down for spite and did its worst to vex the lake. So we begin this poem with a method called pathetic fallacy, which is essentially where the weather reflects the tone of the piece. So we've got a rainstorm, we've got wind tearing the trees down, vexing, so harassing the lake, which reflects the emotions of the speaker. So he is angry because he is waiting for Porphyria, and he feels like she has abandoned him or that she hasn't prioritized him.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've got, when glided in Porphyria, straight she shut the cold out and the storm, and kneeled and made the cheerless grate blaze up and all the cottage warm. So Porphyria is described as gliding into the room, so that kind of suggests that she's angelic. And she seems to, well, she definitely brings warmth to the cottage, so cottage, I was suggesting that he's of a low class person. So she brings warmth and happiness and, joy.
Yep, exactly. So you've got symbolism that she lights up the fire, symbolising potentially the emotional warmth that she brings. And then we've also got, it talks about how she took off her dripping cloak and shawl and took off her dirty gloves. So again, implying maybe that she's of a higher class than the speaker because she's got these more expensive items. And then later on, so he says, her hat and let the damp hair fall, and last she sat down by my side and called me. So last there is important because it's implying that the speaker feels dissatisfied, feels disgruntled with the fact that she has only turned her attention to him last. And then the fact that it ends with me is the last word in that sentence, again reflecting that sense of his feeling that he's abandoned, that he is not Porphyria's priority.
We've got the caesura that serves to emphasise that fact as well.
Yep. Do you want to define caesura?
Oh, yeah, I can do, Miss Davison, thank you. A strong pause in the middle of a line, so you've got that full stop there. That's a caesura.
Great.
Okay, so next we've got, when no voice replied, she put my arm about her waist and made her smooth white shoulder bare, and all her yellow hair displaced, and stooping made my cheek lie there, and spread o'er all her yellow hair. So Porphyria is clearly the person that's in control at this point, echoing the title, Porphyria's Lover. So she is the one putting his arm about her waist, and she's making her shoulder bare, which is quite sexual, quite scandalous.
The bare bit, yeah.
Yeah, but the white shoulder as well is kind of suggesting that she's upper class, that she is so pale.
Which was considered beautiful in Victorian times.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's the one doing the action. She is the subject of the verbs, and he is just the object.
Yeah, she's dominant.
Yep. And then it says, murmuring how she loved me. So this is the only point in the poem where Porphyria is said to be speaking, but again, her speech is reported by the speaker, so murmuring how she loved me, so it's still not even in her own voice. So again, this idea that she becomes an object to her lover. And then the last bit here, she too weak for all her heart's endeavour to set its struggling passion free from pride and vainer ties dissever and give herself to me forever. So the idea again that he is upset that she will not put him first, and it implies that there's this sense of class conflict, that maybe the reason that she is not going to be with him, potentially marry him, is because she's of a higher class. And he is obviously dissatisfied with that. He wants, it says, give herself to me forever. So it implies that he wants to almost own her, and he is upset that that's not happening. Then we've got, but passion sometimes would prevail, nor could tonight's gay feast restrain a sudden thought of one so pale. So we know that Porphyria has come from a feast, from a party or a banquet, and obviously the speaker hasn't been invited, so again emphasising that he is isolated and resentful of the fact that she has not prioritised him.
Okay, then we have, for love of her and all in vain, so she was come through wind and rain. So, yeah, the lover seems very dissatisfied with her. However, she has come through wind and rain. So, despite that, she's actually presented or portrayed, I think, as being quite, she values their relationship.
Yeah, committed to it, yeah.
Yeah, she's committed. She's come through wind and rain. And actually, the weather at the very start of the poem is atrocious. So, elm tops being torn down and so on. So she does seem to value their relationship.
Yeah, and then we've also got a contrast here. So he is pale, basically implying that he's lovesick, that he's at home waiting for her, lovesick and tormented, whereas she is out at a gay feast. And the fact that she's come through the wind and rain, she's taking on what would traditionally have been a more masculine role in Victorian society, that she has done something kind of intrepid, and she has made... she's performed an action, whereas he is the one waiting at home. Pale again would have been more associated with women, and especially the fact that he was waiting at home for her. So he's sort of been forced to take on this more traditionally female role, and he is obviously unhappy about that, as we see later in the poem.
Okay, and now for the exciting bit.
Very excited about murder, Miss Holland. Great. Okay, so we've got, be sure I looked up at her eyes. So looked up, again, he is not in control here. He is not the powerful one at this moment. He is looking up at her. And then happy and proud, at last I knew Porphyria worshipped me.
So, yeah, strange use of the word worshipped as well.
So again, implying that his ideal for the relationship is one where Porphyria, the woman, worships him, that she treats him like a god.
Yeah. Right, surprise made my heart swell, and still it grew while I debated what to do. So debated what to do kind of makes it sound like he's thinking about just something casual that he's going to...
Seems very reasonable.
Yeah, the next action that he's going to do. Then we've got that moment she was mine, fair. So that repetition, shows just how kind of possessive he is. Mine.
Again, that he sees her as an object to be possessed, and that, so it says fair, perfectly pure and good. So those adjectives, fair, pure and good, reflect what was traditionally expected of women, that they would be basically beautiful and morally good. So in that moment, she's fulfilling that role of what he sees as the perfect woman, someone who belongs to him, worships him, and is good and beautiful.
Yeah, so obviously he doesn't want things to change. Things are perfect now, so we've now got...
Yeah, so he wants to preserve that moment in an unusual way.
I found a thing to do, and all her hair in one long yellow string I wound 3 times around her little throat around and strangled her. So we've got a lot of enjambment there, so it's really quite fast-paced.
Yeah.
His continuing action, I suppose the enjambment echoing the fact that he's winding the string around her as well. And
also that he's thinking about it, so it's quite a measured action. It's not just something he does it is on impulse, isn't it? But the idea that it takes quite a few steps to do it.
Yeah, so it is quite a long
measured process,
that he's actually doing. So, so she's killed.
He strangles her,
He strangles her, and again you've got that caesura there to help emphasise that point. He's strangled her, so we can process that. Yeah,
and you see now why we've highlighted "and" the whole way through, because... So before we've had and listing all of the fairly everyday things that he did, and that Porphyria did as well. But he uses that same exact language about strangling the woman that he loves. So really emphasising how psychotic, how psychopathic he is, that he considers strangling her as the same or similar as these normal actions.
It's just a thing to do, so he downplays it.
Yeah, that he's presenting it to the to the reader as normal and reasonable. Although obviously for us it emphasises a sense of shock because it's such a shocking thing described in such normal language. So it really jars with us, or jars us.
Okay, so following that shocking action, Porphyria's lover seems to be trying to convince himself that nothing really serious happened. I mean, no pain felt she. I'm quite sure she felt no pain. So you got that repetition of no pain.
That he tries to portray what he sees as a positive for Porphyria as well. And it gives a sense that he's almost trying to convince us or convince himself that it's the right thing to do. And obviously it makes us question it even more. So the fact that he repeats it makes us feel like it's definitely not the right thing to do. And then we've got, as a shut bud that holds a bee, I warily oped her lids. So he's comparing opening her eyelids to opening a flower that has a bee inside it, which that nature imagery there makes a corpse sound like quite a beautiful thing. So he's actually talking about a dead woman's eyes. But the fact that it holds a bee, so a bee obviously has a sting, so it's implying that maybe he is expecting something dangerous or painful. So maybe showing us that he is not as convinced as he is implying that he did the right thing.
But it's followed straightly after with, again, left the blue eyes without a stain. So he was worried about what was going to happen, but actually he thinks, or he's suggesting that the blue eyes are laughing and there's no stain. So he's kind of treating her as if she is alive, that her blue eyes are laughing.
Yeah, and implying again that she wanted, well, it's not again because it hasn't happened yet, but implying that she wanted it, so laughed implies a sense of intense enjoyment, so almost implying that she's enjoying being this corpse that he can manipulate.
Right, next action, and I untightened next the tress about her neck. Her cheek once more blushed bright beneath my burning kiss. So, of course, the action of untying her hair from around her neck means that the blood has rushed to her face, which is the reason why it's blushing bright. But again, he's kind of suggesting that she is almost still alive and that she's enjoying him kissing her. But of course, she is a corpse, so how can she enjoy that?
Yeah, and again, that contrast, the juxtaposition between a normal action, kissing her, and the horror of what he's actually done, the fact that it's a corpse that he's kissing. Then we've got, I propped her head up as before, only this time my shoulder bore her head. So before we had, remember, Porphyria came in and put his head on her shoulder, and now we've got a reversal of that. Yep. So a repetition in some sense because it's repeating the shoulder, but a reversal of the actions, which is symbolic, I think, of the control that he now has over her because she is a corpse. So he's literally turned her into an object in order to control her. Yeah. And it implies again that there was that desire for power that he had, and so now he's got the masculine powerful role and she is the object, the female object.
Yeah, so she definitely does seem like an object as well, because he says her head which droops upon it still, so referring to her as it rather than she, so those pronouns changed. But then we've got the smiling rosy little head, so the little kind of showing how maybe fragile she is.
Yeah, or infantilizing her as well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought about that. That's creepy.
Yeah, it all is, isn't it? So glad it had its utmost will, that all it scorned at once is fled, and I, its love, am gained instead. So again, this idea that he's trying to frame it to justify it by saying that she's got what she wanted, she was just too weak to actually give herself to me, so I have made her do it, and calling it its utmost will, which I imagine it was not her utmost will to be killed or be strangled with her own hair.
Weird otherwise. Yeah.
And also now we've got, and I, its love, am gained instead. So now I is towards the beginning of the sentence rather than me being at the end, which we saw at the beginning. So again, that reversal of power reflected in the structure of the sentences.
And creepily, it does seem very, very happy as well. Okay.
Right. Porphyria's love, she guessed not how her darling one wish would be heard. So again, that he is trying to frame it as the one thing that she wanted, that he has done this, whereas we know it's all his desire, but he is the speaker there trying to justify himself.
And we've got some more and. So, and thus we sit together now, and all night long we have not stirred, and yet God has not said a word. So we've got the repetition of and, so suggests that the creepy scene is just continuing on.
Yeah, and again, he's portraying it as quite normal, but literally he is cuddling a corpse.
Yes.
And not very normal, but emphasising how psychopathic he is again, and how he's trying to justify what he's done.
Yeah, because clearly it's fine, because the last line has said, God has not said a word. So if God has not shown any sign of
Judgment, then obviously it must be fine.
Then, yeah, clearly everything's good.
From his perspective, anyway. And maybe that implies that he does realise that he's done something wrong, because it sounds like he was almost waiting to see if God would strike him down, judge him, yes. Yeah. And then the last thing we just want to talk about is the structure. So we've talked about some of the reversal in language, but in terms of the rhyme scheme, so it's, what did we say, A, B.
A, B, B.
Yeah. So it's A, B, A, B, and then an extra B at the end, which seems to imply something out of place, which could reflect the psychopathic nature of the speaker, that he's not quite right, and in fact quite wrong, or maybe the idea that he, the view that he has that Porphyria is not acting in the right way, that she's not acting properly as a woman should or as a lover should. So that extra B there, maybe reflecting that sense of something that he sees, the speaker sees, as unnatural. And just before we sign off, we'd just like to emphasise that they are not real people. So it is a character that
presentation.
Browning has written a dramatic monologue for. So it's in the voice of this speaker, the psychopathic speaker, but it's not a real person. So we want to talk about how Browning has portrayed them using the language, rather than just talking about them as if they're real, as if this is a real murder, because obviously it is not.
Yeah.
Right, good.